Well, hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're focusing on Mizuno irons. Now, I said previously that I thought the new Mizuno Pro S3 was the best looking iron out on the market, period. However, Mizuno have recently released the new S1. I knew it was coming, but I wasn't really ready for it. Now, when it comes to this particular iron, it's not going to be for everybody because this iron is a muscle back iron. I'm going to be putting it to the test today against the S3, and we're going to see how they actually perform. From a visual point of view, very similar, but there are some subtle differences which we're going to get into in this video. I'm going to give you some numbers, I'm going to tell you what Mizuno are saying about these clubs, I'm going to give you some feels and performances out on the golf course. Let's get into it. Now, I've had the S3 irons in the bag now for probably about 3 or 4 months. My first outing with them, I actually managed to win the first tournament I ever played with them. I was fitted for these at Bearwood Lakes, which is kind of like the HQ in the UK for Mizuno as to where they do their fitting, and the experience of that fitting was absolutely fantastic. A brand new set of shafts that I had in these particular irons made up, and the feel off the face, as you would expect, very impressive when it comes to Mizuno irons. All in all, performance for me, really good. Getting the flights that I want to get from them, getting everything that I would kind of expect to get from a Mizuno iron. Now, don't be fooled with these particular clubs. They're not designed, as I said, for everybody. They're going to be designed for players that want something that's obviously got that feel that you would expect from Mizuno, but the way they've positioned the CG in both of these models, getting it closer to the kind of center point of the club in previous generations or other types of irons that Mizuno make and other manufacturers make, they're going to push the CG positions around the head, making it a little bit more stable. The downside to that is that the player can't, let's say, maneuver the head quite as much, which means that they can't get the shot shaping that they're requiring. So Mizuno moving back to more of a traditional kind of setup, which is bringing that CG more centered, allowing that club face to be able to twist for the desired shot that that player's looking for. Now, I'm just clipping a couple of 5 irons away down here on the 10th hole at Churston, and what they're saying to me when it comes to the visuals is that we're going to get a slightly thinner top line when it comes to the long irons from the S3 into the S1. And I've got to say, from setup position, this particular head looking, well, pretty small, if I'm honest with you, compared to what I'm seeing out of that S3. Lovely flight, great flight in fact. Feel off the face with both of those irons, actually not a great deal of difference, to be honest with you. Let's get up there and take a closer look and talk a little bit about the tech inside these heads. Now, from a visual point of view, if these two clubs were on the shop rack, you would see definitely a difference when it comes to the looks of them. The S3 being a little bit more sort of channeled out and positioning the weight around the perimeter, which is going to give us that stability that we need with those off-centered strikes. However, when we look at the S1, we're seeing not a great deal there. We got a small channel in the back here, which is enabling us to get that center of gravity in the right place, giving us that vertical launch that's going to be a little bit more consistent, is what Mizuno are telling us. However, I've got to refer to their website on this one because there are some differences when it comes to the actual looks of these clubs, and I just want to give you a bit of an insight into what Mizuno are saying, because to the naked eye, you're not going to see a great deal of difference. However, when it comes to, let's say, blade length, we're getting a consistent 2mm difference, being the S3 being slightly bigger in its profile when it comes to blade length compared to what we're seeing in the S1, 2mm across the board. So as you work your way up through the set, that blade length is going to get bigger and bigger. However, the S3 being 2mm bigger right the way through the set. If we then look at the width of the sole, and this is all to do with turf interaction, allowing that club to work into the ground and out of the ground quickly, and optimizing again the performance in that area. Again, we're talking 2mm differences here in the bottom of these particular clubs. Now, again, to the naked eye, not a great deal of difference, but there is definitely something there that's going to help that player get that club in and out of the ground a little bit easier. However, when we look at the top line, which I think this is an area that really is what a player is going to focus on, again, we're looking at a millimetre difference of, in the pitching wedge, I've got 4 millimetres on the top line as a thickness when it comes to the S1, compared to a 4.6 millimetre difference in the pitching wedge. So we are seeing a slightly thicker top line out of that S3. However, when you work your way up the clubs, let's say into 4 irons, 5 irons and 6 irons, you're going to see that spread just move a little bit more, meaning that that S1, that bladed iron, just looking even thinner on the top, probably to be able to position that CG in the right place. So there is a slight difference there. And again, when it comes to the offset, there is some differences here. We're talking in inches now. When it comes to the pitching wedge, you've got 0.08 inches in that offset, compared to what I'm seeing at the S3, which is 0.11 in the offset. Again, to the naked eye, probably not going to see a big difference there. Now, just sticking with the 5 irons, I've got my S3 again. We're going to lead with that one. But on this 11th hole, I've got wind direction kind of into me here. There's probably about a 10 to 12 mile an hour wind out here this morning. So I want to be able to control the ball flight with these particular clubs. I want to be able to hit that lower launching ball flight, which is allowing me to be able to get that ball to chase out there just a little bit better with it being slightly into wind. I don't want it stalling. So where in the past I've used irons that, let's say, have helped launch the ball up in the air, I've not been able to control them as best as I would like. So let's just hit a couple down here and just get a sense of what it actually feels like to be able to hit this shot, and whether we can see any differences in those launch windows. S3 to get us going with. Absolutely. I've kind of got used to the feel and the launch conditions of this particular iron. So slightly in my back foot, being able to control that flight, you could see that ball just stay down there nice and easily. And then when we move into the S1 club now, again, this club is designed to be able to get that control. And what we talked about, that channel in the back there, being able to control the launch conditions by having the CG in the correct spot. Let's see if I can hit the same sort of shot. I want to try and keep that similar window. Yeah, literally identical. Not seeing a great deal of difference in those two shots, other than one being probably 10 yards right of the other one. Actually, interestingly, Mizuno focusing very much on a feel focus, should we say, when it comes to these particular irons. Now, inside both these heads, we've got that 1025 carbon steel, which is giving us that soft, pure Mizuno type of feel, but you've got this copper underlay inside the heads. And the idea of that is to help with that, well, the vibrations, trying to get in tune with the player, trying to get a focus on trying to get the best feel possible. And they found out by putting this sort of new product inside the heads, they can get an even better feel off the face. Now, is there a difference between these two particular clubs? I'm not sure I'm sensing a great deal of difference, if I'm honest with you. That focus when it comes to the S1 being more of like a firmer feel, but not taking away that soft buttery feel that we're always getting from a Mizuno iron. Again, this is all about tour feedback from their players. Now, I've got to say, when I read a lot of the marketing stuff that goes into these, well, all these manufacturers, basically, they're just kind of recycling a lot of this stuff. So if you read it and then read from 5 years ago, you might read some similarities in what they're talking about, or just using other words that explain this kind of same thing. But when it comes to this launch of the Mizuno Pro S3 and then the S1s now, we're sort of seeing the terminology of legacy reborn. What does that actually mean? Because legacy reborn to me is looking maybe at its heritage and then maybe re-releasing some of the sort of positive stuff that they had from previous generations, and we're talking about probably years gone by. We're still into wind on this 11th hole. I'm just trying to flight a 7-iron down with both of these clubs. A little bit of turn on it, moving it from the flag more towards the left side of the green. But a good amount of control with that particular shot. Now, when it talk about legacy reborn, Mizuno historically have had clubs that have maybe moved into more of a rounded kind of feel or look down by the ball. Now, with the release of these particular setups, we've got now more of straighter lines, more boxier type of looks down by the ball. And this goes back to the old sort of TP range, when they had TP9s and TP11s, you have more of a squarer type of kind of look down by the ball with their irons. And I'm definitely seeing a more squarer look in more so probably in the S1 over even the S3. I think the S3 has a really nice sort of rounded look, where the S1 maybe just has a little bit more of a squarer type of look. But that's what they're focusing when they're talking about Legacy Reborn, having something that's maybe just a look from the older days of Mizuno, the players like Sandy Lyle, the players like Nick Faldo that used to use those irons to great effect. And again, now looking down at this sort of bladed iron, definitely a smaller profile with the 7 iron. It's not a great deal of difference, but it's definitely there. Similar flight, if anything, just a fraction lower. And just, again, because it went a little bit lower, it just carried just a few yards further onto that green. But two very similar flights, two very similar shots. Let's take a closer look at the numbers of what we're getting from these 7 irons that I got from the studio. Now, please note, when it comes to these two irons, 34 degrees in loft with both the 7 irons in the S3 and the S1 models. However, I was expecting to see some differences in the numbers. Let's get into it. Ball speed off the club face, S3 iron, I'm getting 111, nearly 112 mile an hour off the club face. Compared that to the S1, interestingly 113 and a half that I'm getting off the club face, so just a little bit quicker off the face. Might be because I'm just warming up a little bit more when I'm in the studio. However, launch conditions, a little bit higher out of the S3 over, let's say, the S1. Not a great deal of difference in it, 19.2 compared to 18.9. But this is the big one for me, which I expected to maybe be a slight difference. S3 spinning at 6,776 revs on an average, compared to what I'm getting out of the S1 at 6,744 revs. I expected the S3, from historic performances for me with bladed irons, to spin up just a little bit more. But this is probably why I love the S3 so much, is because I get really good spin numbers. I get great consistency with my spin, which ultimately gives me that control from front to back. It's always, people focus on maybe dispersion from left to right, but actually if your spin numbers are up and down or inconsistent, you're going to get some massive jumps in your distance control. And talking about the peak heights and things like that, 1 yard difference, I'm getting 30 yards peak height out of the S3 compared to 31, so slightly higher out of that S1. Not a great deal, you're not going to see that off probably your naked eye out on the golf course. And then 150 yards out of that S3 compared to 154 yards out of that S1 from a carry point of view. So interestingly, expected to see maybe a slight difference there, but I'm actually really happy that I'm seeing that consistency from the S3 into the S1, which I actually think could work really well if you were maybe looking at even comboing this particular set. Now, I've got to say, when I first unboxed the S1 irons, my first impression was, wow, have I made a bit of a mistake moving into the S3s, knowing that the S1s were coming out? But now, having been out on the golf course with them, I just get the feeling that actually we've got two irons here that, performance-wise, I don't feel a great deal of difference. I certainly don't see a great deal of difference when it comes to the numbers of them. But what I am seeing is that the S3 is going to give me just that little bit more confidence when it comes to performance out on the golf course. I've got a little bit of a bigger profile in its head. I've got a little bit more perimeter weighting than what I've got out of the S1s. And numbers-wise, actually very, very similar. So it'll be interesting to see how many players actually move into this S1 lineup. I would probably say that the S1 lineup, if you're looking at that, then maybe the S3 might just over a season give you a little bit more consistency with that extra perimeter weighting around the edge. But I'd like to hear down in the comments, will you be going out and testing either of these irons this year and putting them into your bag? I've got to say, from a feel point of view, exactly what I would expect to see or feel from Mizuno. And the performance, well, they're performing well for me, and they're definitely staying in my golf bag. But I'd like to hear down in the comments from you. If you are new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you again on the next video.